You people need to get off this aircraft right now. The words hang in the air of the luxury private jet's cabin, sharp and cold as ice. 58-year-old Elena Reyes freezes her hand, still resting on her designer handbag. Next to her, her daughter Isabella, the 40-year-old CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing AI companies, stands perfectly still, her expression unreadable, except for a slight tightening around her eyes. The flight attendant's stance is rigid, arms crossed, blocking their path to the plush leather seats they had paid $55,000 to occupy for the next 10 hours. Behind him, the pilot and co-pilot exchange glances, their faces carefully blank. Outside the small oval windows, a fine mist slicks the tarmac of the exclusive private airfield, where the wealthiest of the wealthy begin their journeys far from the crowded terminals of commercial airports. "Excuse me." Isabella's voice is controlled, measured the same tone she uses in boardrooms when someone has made a catastrophic mistake. Her mother's hand finds her arm, squeezing gently, a warning, or perhaps a reminder. "There's been a mistake with your booking," the attendant continues, not meeting their eyes. "This aircraft is reserved for other clients today." Isabella's phone buzzes in her hand, a text message from her assistant confirming that the $55,000 payment for the charter had cleared their account exactly 27 minutes ago. She holds up the screen, the payment confirmation clearly visible. "There's no mistake. We booked this flight last week, and the payment has cleared." The pilot steps forward now, his expression apologetic but firm. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do. We need you to deplane immediately." 20 minutes later, Isabella Reyes stands in the mist outside the terminal building, her mother huddled under an umbrella beside her as she makes the call that will change everything. Her voice is still perfectly calm as she speaks to her company's chief legal counsel, but her eyes, those eyes that have stared down billionaire investors and skeptical venture capitalists, burn with a fire that anyone who knows her would recognize as dangerous. But to understand how we got here, how one of the most successful Latina women in the American tech industry and her mother ended up stranded on a misty tarmac after being thrown off a jet they had paid for, we need to go back. Back to the decisions made in boardrooms and corner offices, to the whispered conversations and subtle power plays that set these events in motion long before Isabella and Elena Reyes ever stepped foot on that private jet. 3 days earlier, Isabella Reyes sits at the head of a gleaming conference table on the 35th floor of a downtown Austin skyscraper. Sunlight streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of the 12 executives hanging on her every word. The quarterly numbers glow on the massive screen behind her, all of them pointing upward. Growth that defies the industry downturn. Profits that make competitors seethe with envy. "We've exceeded projections in every department," Isabella says, scrolling through the presentation on her tablet. The subtle sapphire earrings she wears catch the light as she moves. "The new AI logistics platform is already generating 30% more revenue than anticipated, and our client retention rate has hit 97%. If you want to see how this all unfolds, how Isabella Reyes went from this triumphant moment to being kicked off a private jet, and what happened in those 20 crucial minutes that led to everyone losing their jobs, make sure you're with us for the whole story. It's a journey through privilege power and what happens when the wrong people are underestimated." At the conference table, Preston Davenport, the 60-year-old chief financial officer with salt and pepper hair and an Ivy League pedigree, shifts uncomfortably in his seat. "These numbers are impressive, Isabella, but I'm concerned about the cost of your mother's upcoming birthday celebration. The company jet for a personal trip to Lake Como seems excessive." The room goes quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that precedes storms. Isabella's expression doesn't change, but something in her eyes hardens. Preston, my mother is the founding investor in this company. She remortgaged her home to give us startup capital when no one else would touch us. The board approved this expenditure unanimously last month, and it's coming from my personal compensation package. Preston nods stiffly, but the damage is done. The words hang in the air between them, an invisible line drawn. Isabella makes a mental note of the interaction, filing it away with other similar moments that have occurred with increasing frequency over the past year. Later that evening, Isabella sits across from her mother at Elena's kitchen table. The same table where 15 years ago they had spread out loan documents and business plans, dreaming of a future that seemed impossibly distant. The same table where Elena had signed away the equity in her home, the home she had worked 30 years as a hospital administrator to pay for all because she believed in her daughter's vision. "You don't need to do all this for my birthday," Elena says, passing a plate of her famous tres leches cake across the table. "A quiet dinner would be just fine." Isabella smiles, the hard edge she maintains in the corporate world softening in her mother's presence. "You remortgaged your house for me, Mom. The least I can do is take you to Italy in style for your birthday. First class on a regular airline would be just fine." Elena insists, her practical nature showing through. Despite her daughter's success, Elena still clips coupons and shops sales habits formed during decades of careful budgeting as a single mother. "We're taking the private jet, and that's final," Isabella says with a playful firmness. "You deserve to see how the other half lives at least once." What neither woman knows as they sit in the warm glow of Elena's modest kitchen is that in a luxurious penthouse across town, a phone call is being made. Preston Davenport paces across his marble floors, speaking in hushed tones. "She's becoming too confident, too unassailable," he says into the phone. "The board is practically eating out of her hand after these quarterly results." The voice on the other end of the line is smooth, calculated. "Then perhaps it's time to remind Ms. Reyes that there are some doors that remain closed, no matter how successful you become." The next morning, Isabella arrives at her office before dawn, a habit formed during the lean startup years that she's never abandoned despite her success. Her assistant Marco is already there, organizing the day's schedule and preparing the morning briefings. "The Lake Como trip is all confirmed for your mother's birthday," Marco says, handing Isabella her first coffee of the day. "The private charter company sent over the final itinerary." Isabella nods, scrolling through her emails. "Did you book the restaurant I mentioned for her birthday dinner, the one with the view of the lake?" "Villa d'Este, just as you requested," Marco confirms with a smile. "And I've arranged for flowers in your suite and a private shopping experience in Bellagio. Your mother is going to have the birthday of a lifetime." Isabella's phone rings an unlisted number. She considers letting it go to voicemail, but something compels her to answer. "Isabella Reyes," she says, her professional tone automatically engaging. "Ms. Reyes, this is Harrison Croft, chairman of the board at Croft Capital." The voice is smooth, practiced, belonging to one of the most powerful venture capitalists in the industry, and one who had repeatedly declined to invest in Isabella's company during its early years. "Mr. Croft?" Isabella responds, curiosity edging her voice. "This is unexpected." "I've been watching your company's performance with great interest," he continues. "Very impressive work. I wonder if you might be available for lunch today. There's a matter I'd like to discuss that could be mutually beneficial." Isabella glances at her calendar, already packed with meetings. "I'd be happy to meet. Marco can work something out with your office for later this week." "I was rather hoping for today," Croft presses. "It's a time-sensitive opportunity." Against her better judgment, Isabella agrees to rearrange her schedule. 4 hours later, she sits across from Harrison Croft at an exclusive restaurant where the menus have no prices and the clientele includes senators and CEOs. Croft is in his 60s, with the appearance of old money and the confident demeanor of someone unaccustomed to hearing the word no. "I'll get straight to the point," Croft says after they've ordered. "Croft Capital wants to acquire a significant stake in your company. We're prepared to make a very generous offer." Isabella takes a sip of water, buying herself time to process the unexpected proposal. "We're not looking for additional investment at this time. Our last funding round was oversubscribed and our cash position is strong." Croft's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "This isn't just about capital, Isabella. It's about connections doors that can be opened, certain obstacles that can be removed." There's something in his tone, a subtle emphasis that raises Isabella's internal alarms. What obstacles would those be? "Let's be frank." Croft leans forward. "You've done remarkably well, especially considering the unique challenges someone like you faces in this industry. But there's a ceiling, Isabella. There always is. We can help you break through it." The implication hangs in the air between them. Isabella's expression remains neutral, but her mind races. This lunch suddenly feels less like an investment discussion and more like a veiled threat. "Our company is doing quite well breaking through ceilings on our own," she responds evenly. "But I appreciate your interest." Croft's smile tightens. Think about it. Things can change quickly in this business. Today's success can become tomorrow's cautionary tale. As they part ways outside the restaurant, Croft shakes her hand a moment too long. "I understand you're taking your mother to Lake Como for her birthday. How lovely private jet, I presume?" Isabella's pulse quickens slightly. She hadn't mentioned those details to him. "Yes, she deserves the best." "Indeed she does." Croft agrees with a nod that somehow feels ominous. Safe travels. The morning of the Italian trip dawns bright and clear. Isabella arrives at her mother's house, early luxury luggage in tow. Elena greets her at the door wearing a smart travel outfit and a nervous smile. "I couldn't sleep a wink," Elena admits as they load the car. "I kept thinking about Italy, about all those places I've only seen in movies." Isabella squeezes her mother's hand. "We're going to make incredible memories, Mom. This is long overdue." The drive to the private airfield is filled with excited conversation about their itinerary, the villas they'll visit, the foods they'll try, the history they'll absorb. As they pull up to the exclusive terminal, Elena's eyes widen at the sleek jets parked on the tarmac. "These aren't planes," she whispers. "They're like something from a science fiction movie." Isabella laughs, enjoying her mother's wonder. "Wait until you see the inside. It's like a flying 5-star hotel." They're greeted by ground staff who take their luggage and escort them toward the gleaming white jet with gold accents that will carry them across the Atlantic. Isabella notices her mother straightening her posture, adjusting her scarf's small, nervous gestures of someone entering an unfamiliar world. "You belong here," Isabella whispers to her, "just as much as anyone." As they approach the aircraft steps, the flight crew emerges to greet them. The captain, co-pilot, and flight attendant all wear crisp uniforms and professional smiles, but Isabella senses something off in their body language, a stiffness, a reluctance. "Ms. Reyes," the flight attendant asks, his gaze moving between the two women. "Yes," Isabella confirms. "My assistant confirmed everything yesterday. This is my mother, Elena Reyes." And that's when it happens. The moment that will later be dissected in boardrooms, courtrooms, and across social media. "You people need to get off this aircraft right now. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know if something similar has ever happened to you or someone you know. These stories need to be shared. The confrontation on the tarmac escalates quickly. Isabella presents the payment confirmation, the booking details, all the evidence that they have every right to be on that plane. The flight crew remains unmoved. "The aircraft has been chartered by another client," the pilot insists. There must have been a scheduling error. Then call your company headquarters, Isabella demands, her CEO voice now fully engaged. This is unacceptable. The pilot makes a show of speaking into his phone, turning away as if for privacy. When he returns, his expression is apologetic, but firm. I've confirmed with management there's been a double booking, and the other party has priority. We can try to arrange alternative transportation, but it won't be today. Isabella's intuition, the same instinct that has helped her navigate the treacherous waters of the tech industry, tells her this is no accident. Her mind flashes back to Croft's words, to Preston's objections, to a dozen subtle interactions that suddenly form a pattern. My mother and I will be leaving, Isabella says finally, her voice cold. But make no mistake, this isn't over. As they walk back to their car, Elena takes her daughter's arm. Isabella, it's okay. We can fly commercial. Lake Como will still be there. Isabella helps her mother into the passenger seat before responding. It's not okay, Mom. None of this is okay. She closes the door and walks around to the driver's side, pulling out her phone. The mist has thickened into a drizzle, speckling the screen as she dials a number. Her legal counsel, David Chen, answers on the first ring. David, it's Isabella Reyes. I need you to drop everything. We have a situation. 20 minutes later, Isabella sets in motion a chain of events that will reverberate throughout the industry. David has already filed emergency motions and contacted regulatory authorities. Isabella's head of communications has prepared statements. And most importantly, Isabella has made 3 crucial phone calls to board members whose loyalty she trusts implicitly. The first signs that the tide is turning come when Isabella's phone rings. The CEO of the private jet charter company, his voice tight with controlled panic. Ms. Reyes, I've just been made aware of the situation. I want to personally apologize for this inexcusable incident. The crew has been suspended pending investigation, and we have another aircraft standing by to take you and your mother to Italy immediately. Isabella's response is measured. I appreciate the call, but we will no longer be using your services. I expect a full refund processed within the hour. Of course, absolutely. And please, if there's anything else we can… There is, Isabella interrupts. I want to know who called your company to interfere with our booking. The silence on the other end of the line speaks volumes. I thought so, Isabella says. You'll be hearing from my attorneys. By the time Isabella and Elena return to Isabella's penthouse apartment, the story has already begun to spread through the industry grapevine. Isabella's phone buzzes constantly with messages of support, outrage, and offers of assistance. In her home office, she conducts a virtual emergency meeting with her executive team, minus one notable absence. Preston Davenport has suddenly become unreachable. I've tracked the payment interference, her head of cybersecurity reports. Someone with high-level access at Croft Capital contacted the charter company directly and offered them triple the booking fee to lose your reservation. Elena sits quietly in the corner of the room, watching her daughter command the situation with a mixture of pride and concern. This isn't the birthday celebration they had planned, but seeing Isabella in her element turning an act of discrimination into a moment of reckoning is powerful in its own way. As the virtual meeting concludes, Isabella turns to her mother. I'm so sorry about Lake Como, Mom. Elena crosses the room and takes her daughter's hands. I'm not. This seeing you fight back, seeing you refuse to be treated this way, this is better than any trip to Italy. Isabella smiles, but her eyes remain determined. Why not both? We're still going to Italy. I've already arranged for another jet with a company owned by someone I trust. 3 hours later, as Isabella and Elena finally board the new private jet, Isabella receives a notification that causes her to pause at the top of the stairs. She reads it twice, then shows her phone to her mother. The board just called an emergency meeting, she says quietly. They've terminated Preston Davenport effective immediately, and Harrison Croft has been forced to resign from the charter company's board. Elena's eyes widen. All that in just a few hours. Isabella nods, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. Sometimes people forget that I didn't become CEO by accident. I've been preparing for moments like this my entire career. As they settle into the luxurious cabin, champagne flutes in hand, Isabella's phone buzzes one final time before takeoff. It's a message from her communications director. Breaking news: entire flight crew and management team from the charter company have been fired. CEO issuing public apology and announcing company-wide anti-discrimination training. Isabella shows the message to her mother, who shakes her head in amazement. 20 minutes, Elena murmurs. It only took 20 minutes for you to change everything. I learned from the best, Isabella replies, raising her glass in a toast. Happy birthday, Mom. As the jet accelerates down the runway and lifts into the clouds, mother and daughter look out at the shrinking world below, a world that tried to tell them where they belonged and learned to its cost that power comes in many forms, and justice can move at the speed of light when wielded by the right hands. But the story doesn't end with this victory. As the private jet crosses the Atlantic carrying Isabella and Elena toward the City of Light, forces are already gathering. Allies and enemies alike, responding to the seismic shift in power that has just occurred. Because in the high-stakes world of technology and venture capital, nothing happens in isolation, and every action creates reactions that can either build empires or destroy them. The flight to Italy takes 9 hours, during which Isabella and Elena alternate between celebrating their victory and strategizing for what comes next, because Isabella knows this isn't over. A man like Harrison Croft doesn't accept defeat easily, and the systems that enabled today's discrimination run deeper than a single charter company or a disloyal CFO. They're going to come after the company next, Isabella says quietly, as they sip champagne over the mid-Atlantic. Croft has too many connections, too much influence. He'll try to tank our stock, spread rumors, maybe even poach our clients. Elena studies her daughter's face to face. She's watched transform from a determined child to a powerful woman. And you're ready for that. Isabella's smile is small but confident. I've been ready my whole life, Mom. You taught me that. As the Italian coastline appears in the distance, Isabella's phone connects to international service, and immediately notifications flood the screen. News alerts, messages from board members, emails from industry leaders expressing solidarity. And one message that makes her sit up straighter, a confidential tip from a former Croft Capital employee with evidence that Croft has been orchestrating similar incidents, targeting other minority executives for years. Isabella forwards the message to David Chen with one instruction: follow this trail all the way. Lake Como welcomes them with perfect spring weather and the promised suite overlooking the glistening water. For the next 3 days, Isabella keeps her promise to make this trip about her mother's birthday. They visit charming villas, cruise the lake, and dine in restaurants where the chefs come to their table to pay respects to the American CEO, whose name has suddenly become synonymous with standing up against discrimination in the tech world. On the evening of Elena's actual birthday, as they sit at the promised table, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elena reaches across to take her daughter's hand. I've been thinking about your father, she says softly, about how proud he would be. Isabella's father had died when she was 12. A hard-working man who had instilled in his daughter a belief that excellence was the best response to prejudice. His absence had shaped both their lives, forcing Elena to become both mother and father provider and nurturer. He always said I'd change the world someday, Isabella replies, squeezing her mother's hand. I thought he meant the technology we'd create, but maybe he meant this standing up, refusing to back down. The waiter arrives with a small cake adorned with a single candle. For the birthday of Senora Reyes, he announces with a flourish, with compliments from the chef. As Elena makes her wish and blows out the candle, Isabella's phone buzzes yet again. She glances at it briefly, then sets it face down on the table. No more business tonight, she declares. Tonight is just for us. What Isabella doesn't share with her mother is the content of that message news that will transform their victory into something much larger when they return home. News that will turn a single act of resistance into a movement that could reshape an entire industry. The next morning, as Elena enjoys a leisurely bath in their suite's luxurious bathroom, Isabella stands on their balcony making calls. The stunning view of the lake stretches before her, but her mind is back in Austin, navigating the chessboard that her professional life has become. The evidence is overwhelming, David, her legal counsel, tells her. We've uncovered at least 7 similar incidents in the past 2 years alone, all targeting executives from underrepresented groups, all orchestrated through Croft's network. Isabella watches a ferry glide across the lake sunlight, dancing on its wake. And what about Preston? How deep was his involvement? Deep enough, David confirms. We've recovered emails showing he was feeding Croft insider information for months, but here's the interesting part. He wasn't acting alone. There's evidence that at least 2 other executives were involved. Isabella's grip tightens on her phone. Names: Richard Henderson in business development and Patricia Woodward in marketing. Isabella isn't surprised by the first name, but the second catches her off guard. Patricia had always presented herself as an ally, frequently speaking about the importance of diversity in tech. Another mask revealed. There's more, David continues. We've been contacted by 3 other CEOs who experienced similar discrimination after refusing acquisition offers from Croft Capital. They're willing to join forces in a class action suit. Isabella considers the implications. A single incident might be dismissed as an unfortunate misunderstanding, but a pattern, that's harder to explain away. Coordinate with their legal teams, she instructs, and leak the pattern to 3 specific journalists. You know which ones. No direct attribution to us yet. As she ends the call, Elena emerges from the bathroom, wrapped in a plush hotel robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. I thought this trip was supposed to be business-free, she teases. Isabella smiles apologetically. Last call, I promise. We have a full day ahead shopping in Bellagio, and then lunch at that little trattoria you read about. But as they enjoy their day in Italy, as Elena tries on silk scarves at designer boutiques and savors authentic Italian cuisine, Isabella's phone continues to vibrate with updates. The story is spreading, gaining momentum, evolving from a single incident involving one CEO to a revelation of systemic discrimination at the highest levels of the tech industry. By evening, when they return to their suite, the first articles have appeared online. Carefully sourced, meticulously fact-checked, the stories detail a pattern of discriminatory practices targeting minority executives who refuse to play by the traditional rules of the industry. Isabella's incident is mentioned, but not highlighted, just one example among many, exactly as she had planned. This is bigger than us now, she tells Elena, as they review the coverage together. It's becoming a movement. Elena, always perceptive, studies her daughter's expression. You planned for this, didn't you? Not the incident itself, but the response. You were ready. Isabella nods slowly. I've seen too many talented people pushed out of this industry because they didn't fit someone's idea of what a tech executive should look like. I always knew that if it happened to me, I wouldn't go quietly. The remainder of their Italian trip passes in a curious blend of celebration and strategy. During the days, they are tourists visiting historic gardens, exploring charming lakeside villages, enjoying the simple pleasure of freshly brewed espresso at sidewalk cafes. But each evening, Isabella spends an hour or two orchestrating a response that grows more powerful by the day. On their final night in Italy, Isabella receives a call from Dr. Evelyn Reed, the chairwoman of her company's board of directors. Dr. Reed had been one of Isabella's earliest supporters, one of the few prominent Black women in venture capital who had recognized Isabella's potential when others had dismissed her. "The board is unanimously behind you," Dr. Reed says without preamble. "We've approved an emergency fund to cover legal expenses for the class action, and we're issuing a statement tomorrow condemning discriminatory practices in the industry." Isabella closes her eyes briefly, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "Thank you, Evelyn. This means everything." "Don't thank me yet, Doctor," Reed warns. "Croft is fighting back. He's calling in favors, pressuring investors trying to isolate you. This is going to get worse before it gets better." "Let him try," Isabella responds, her voice steady. "We've been dealing with men like him our entire careers. The difference is this time we're not fighting alone." As their private jet, provided by a competing venture capital firm eager to distance itself from Croft's tactics, begins its descent toward home. Isabella and Elena sit side by side, watching the familiar skyline emerge through scattered clouds. "Are you ready for this?" Elena asks softly. Isabella takes her mother's hand. "Do you remember what you told me when I was 10, and that teacher said girls weren't good at computers?" Elena smiles at the memory. "I told him he clearly hadn't met my daughter yet." "Exactly," Isabella nods. "Croft and his allies have a limited imagination. They can't conceive of a world where people like us have power. That's their weakness, not ours." The jet touches down smoothly, taxiing toward the private terminal, where just days ago they had faced humiliation. Today, a different scene awaits them. As they descend the stairs, Isabella notices a group of people standing near the entrance to the terminal, her executive team board members, and surprisingly, a cluster of young tech employees holding signs of support. Dr. Reed steps forward, embracing Isabella, and then Elena. "Welcome home. How was Italy?" "Transformative," Isabella answers with a smile. "In more ways than one." Dr. Reed lowers her voice. "The media is waiting outside. This has become the biggest story in tech this year." Isabella nods, straightening her shoulders. "Then let's not keep them waiting." As they make their way through the terminal, Isabella spots two familiar faces among the waiting press corps: Richard Henderson and Patricia Woodward, her former executives, now looking distinctly uncomfortable as they stand to the side, no longer part of her inner circle. "Isabella," Richard calls out, stepping forward with a strained smile. "We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." Isabella cuts him off with a raised hand. "Save it for the deposition, Richard. I believe our lawyers will be in touch." Outside, camera flashes erupt as Isabella emerges with her mother and Dr. Reed flanking her. Microphones thrust forward, questions overlapping into an indecipherable cacophony. Isabella raises her hand, and somehow the crowd falls silent. "What happened to my mother and me last week was not an isolated incident." She begins, her voice clear and strong. "It was part of a pattern, a systematic effort to remind certain people that no matter how successful they become, no matter what they achieve, there are those who believe they don't belong. She pauses, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled reporters. But those days are over. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every qualified person who has been told they don't belong, who has been denied opportunities not because of their abilities, but because of what they look like or where they come from. A reporter calls out, "Ms. Reyes Harrison Croft has denied any involvement in the incident. He claims this is a publicity stunt to boost your company's profile." Isabella smiles slightly. Mr. Croft is entitled to his opinion. The evidence, however, tells a different story, one that will soon be presented in court. But today isn't about Mr. Croft. It's about the future. We're building an industry where merit truly matters more than connections or conformity. Another voice from the crowd. What about the charter company? They've issued an apology and fired the entire flight crew and management team. Accountability is important, Isabella acknowledges. But this isn't about punishment. It's about change, real lasting change in how our industry operates. One incident, one company, one apology isn't enough. We need systemic transformation. As the press conference continues, Elena watches her daughter with quiet pride. This is the Isabella she has always known, not just brilliant and determined, but principled. A woman who fights not just for herself, but for others who might not have the platform or power to fight for themselves. The days that follow are a whirlwind of activity. The class action lawsuit is formally filed, naming Croft Capital and Harrison Croft as the primary defendants. The evidence once compiled and presented is damning emails, recorded conversations, financial transactions forming an undeniable pattern of discrimination and retaliation against executives who refuse to conform to the industry's unwritten rules. Isabella's company launches a new initiative, the Innovate Forward Fund, to support startups founded by underrepresented entrepreneurs. The initial commitment of $50 million sends a clear message. This isn't just about fighting against the old ways, it's about building something better. But as Dr. Reed had predicted, Croft doesn't surrender without a fight. 2 weeks after Isabella and Elena's return from Italy, the counterattack begins. First come the rumors about financial irregularities at Isabella's company, suggestions that her meteoric rise was due to factors other than merit insinuations about her personal life designed to distract from the real issues. Then come the more direct attacks. A major client, one with long-standing ties to Croft, suddenly cancels their contract. A planned partnership with another tech giant is mysteriously put on hold. Most concerning several key employees receive tempting job offers from Croft Capital subsidiaries, offers too generous to be coincidental. "He's trying to bleed us dry," Isabella tells her executive team during an emergency meeting. "Targeting our revenue streams, our partnerships, our talent, classic scorched earth tactics." Benjamin Chen, her chief technology officer, and one of her oldest friends in the industry, nods grimly. "We expected this. The question is, how do we respond?" Isabella leans back in her chair, considering. "We could fight fire with fire, call in our own favors, pressure. His allies play the same game." "But," Dr. Reed prompts, sensing Isabella's hesitation. "But that's exactly what he expects." Isabella continues, leaning forward now, energy animating her features. "He wants to drag us down to his level, make this a personal battle between him and me. If we do that, we've already lost the larger war, even if we win this battle." She stands, moving to the window that overlooks the city. "No, we need to change the game entirely. Croft thrives in a world of backroom deals and quiet pressure, so let's bring everything into the light." The plan that emerges from that meeting is bold, perhaps even reckless. Rather than hiding from Croft's attacks, Isabella's company will document them meticulously and share them publicly. Each cancelled contract, each poached employee, each planted rumor becomes not a setback, but evidence further proof of the very behavior at the heart of their lawsuit. Transparency as a weapon, Dr. Reed muses when Isabella outlines the strategy. It's risky. Everything worth doing is, Isabella responds. But it's also unexpected. Men like Croft operate in the shadows. They're not prepared for someone who refuses to play by those rules. The strategy begins to bear fruit almost immediately. When a major client cancels their contract, Isabella's company issues a press release thanking them for their past business and wishing them well with their new service provider, a Croft Capital subsidiary. No accusations, just facts presented in a way that makes the connection impossible to miss. When 3 key engineers resign on the same day, all to accept positions at different companies that share a single investor, Croft Capital, the pattern is highlighted again, not through allegations, but through simple reporting of facts. Journalists begin to connect the dots. Industry forums buzz with discussions about the tactics being employed, and most importantly, other companies start to distance themselves from Croft, and Croft Capital wary of being associated with what is increasingly being perceived as unethical behavior. 6 weeks after the incident on the private jet, Isabella is invited to give the keynote address at Future Forward, one of the industry's most prestigious conferences. It's a platform typically reserved for established industry leaders, the old guard of Silicon Valley. Her invitation is a clear signal that the balance of power is shifting. The night before her speech, Isabella sits with Elena in the living room of her penthouse, reviewing her remarks. "Is it too much?" she asks, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Am I pushing too hard?" Elena considers the question carefully. "What did your father always say about moments that matter?" Isabella smiles at the memory. That they're not defined by what's easy or comfortable, but by what's necessary. "And is this necessary?" Elena asks simply. Isabella thinks of all the emails she's received in the past weeks from young Latinas, seeing themselves represented in tech leadership for the first time from older executives who had been pushed out of the industry years ago for challenging the status quo, from employees at companies across the tech landscape who finally feel empowered to speak up about their own experiences. "Yes," she says finally, "it's necessary." The next day, Isabella steps onto the Future Forward stage to thunderous applause. She wears a tailored suit in a deep, confident cobalt blue, a deliberate choice. No muted colors, no attempt to blend in or downplay her presence. The message is clear before she even speaks. She is not here to apologize for taking up space. 6 weeks ago, she begins, her voice steady and clear. "My mother and I were removed from a private jet we had chartered for her birthday trip to Italy. The reason given was a scheduling error. The real reason, as evidence has since confirmed, was that certain individuals in our industry decided to remind us of what they believe is our proper place." She pauses, letting the words hang in the air. But this isn't a story about one incident or one family. It's about an industry at a crossroads. For too long, we've accepted a culture that rewards certain types of people and excludes others not based on merit or innovation or vision, but on unspoken rules about who belongs and who doesn't. The audience is utterly silent, hanging on every word. Isabella looks out at the sea of faces, some uncomfortable, some inspired, all attentive. "The technology we create shapes the future of human experience," she continues. "It influences how people communicate, learn, work, and live. If that technology is created by a homogeneous group, by people who all share similar backgrounds, perspectives, and blind spots, then we are building a future that serves some people better than others. She steps away from the podium, now moving freely across the stage, her confidence palpable. The defense of the status quo is often framed in terms of meritocracy. The best rise to the top, regardless of background. But true meritocracy requires equal opportunity, equal access, equal assumption of competence. And the evidence is overwhelming that these conditions do not yet exist in our industry. For the next 30 minutes, Isabella outlines a vision for the tech industry that challenges its fundamental assumptions, not with anger or accusation, but with clarity and conviction. She presents data on the financial outperformance of diverse companies, shares stories of innovations that emerged from diverse teams, and offers practical steps that companies can take to create truly inclusive cultures. This isn't about charity or optics, she emphasizes toward the end of her speech. It's about building better companies and better technologies. It's about recognizing that excellence doesn't look one way, or speak with one voice, or come from one background. Excellence is diverse by its very nature, because the problems we're trying to solve are diverse. As she concludes, the applause begins slowly, and then builds to a standing ovation that lasts for nearly 5 minutes. Isabella stands on the stage, accepting the response with gracious nods, but her eyes search the crowd until they find her mother seated in the front row, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. That evening, as Isabella and Elena share a quiet dinner at home, tres leches cake again, their tradition for significant days. Isabella's phone buzzes with a text from Dr. Reed. "Turn on the news. Now." They move to the living room where Isabella switches on the large wall-mounted screen. The breaking news banner scrolls across the bottom of the screen. Breaking Croft Capital CEO and Chairman Harrison Croft steps down amid discrimination scandal. The anchor's voice fills the room. In a stunning development, Harrison Croft has resigned from all positions at Croft Capital effective immediately. This comes hours after the leak of internal emails in which Croft and other executives discussed strategies to block the advancement of minority leaders in the tech industry. Croft Capital's stock has plummeted in after-hours trading, with analysts predicting. Isabella mutes the television, turning to her mother with wide eyes. "It worked. It actually worked." Elena shakes her head in wonder. 20 minutes to get everyone fired, 6 weeks to bring down one of the most powerful men in tech. Not bad for a girl they said wasn't good with computers. They laugh together, the release of tension almost dizzying. But even as they celebrate this victory, Isabella knows that the work is far from over. Croft is just one man, one symptom of a deeper problem. The real transformation will take years, perhaps decades. The next morning, Isabella wakes to the sound of her phone ringing. It's David, her legal counsel, his voice tight with urgency. "Isabella, we need to talk now." She sits up in bed, instantly alert. "What's happened?" "Croft's resignation wasn't voluntary," David explains. "He was forced out by Croft Capital's board after a junior employee leaked those emails, and now we know why he was so determined to gain control of your company." Isabella waits, sensing that whatever comes next will change everything again. "Your AI logistics platform," David continues. "The one that's been so successful, Croft's team has been trying to build a competing product for years, but they couldn't make it work. Your technology is years ahead of anything they have. That's why he wanted to acquire you, not to help you break through any ceiling, but to get his hands on your intellectual property." Isabella processes this information, pieces falling into place. "So this was never about me being Latina or a woman, it was about our technology all along." "Yes and no," David hedges. "Based on the leaked emails, it seems the discrimination was real. They specifically targeted minority executives for these tactics. But the motivation wasn't just prejudice, it was also old-fashioned corporate espionage. After ending the call, Isabella sits in silent thought for several minutes. The revelation adds a new dimension to everything that's happened, one that transforms a story of discrimination into something even more complex. In the weeks that follow, the landscape of the tech industry begins to shift in subtle but significant ways. Croft Capital's new leadership reaches out to Isabella with a settlement offer for the class action lawsuit, one that includes not only substantial financial compensation, but also commitments to meaningful changes in hiring, investment, and governance practices. Other venture capital firms eager to distance themselves from Croft Capital's tarnished reputation announce their own diversity initiatives. Tech companies across the spectrum begin publishing more transparent data about representation in their workforces and leadership teams. And perhaps most significantly, Isabella's company launches a new security platform specifically designed to prevent the kind of corporate espionage that Croft had attempted, technology that protects not just data, but the innovative ideas of startups and smaller companies that might otherwise be vulnerable to predatory tactics. 3 months after the incident on the private jet, Isabella and Elena sit once again at Elena's kitchen table. The tres leches cake between them is still warm, filling the modest home with its familiar, comforting aroma. "I've been thinking," Elena says, cutting perfect squares of cake. "Maybe it's time for me to get more involved in the company again, not just as the founding investor, but in a more active role." Isabella looks up in surprise. "Really? I thought you were happy with retirement." "I was." Elena nods, sliding a slice of cake onto her daughter's plate. "But this whole experience has reminded me of something important. The work isn't done yet, not even close." Isabella studies her mother's face, seeing the same determination that had led Elena to remortgage her home all those years ago. "What did you have in mind?" "You've started that Innovate Forward Fund," Elena says. "I want to lead it. Use my experience, my network from all those years in hospital administration, help these young founders navigate not just the business challenges, but the other obstacles they'll face." Isabella feels a surge of emotion, pride, love, gratitude, all mingled together. "The Elena Reyes Foundation," she says softly. "It's perfect." As they eat their cake and discuss the details of this new venture, Isabella's phone lights up with a notification. It's a news alert. Former Croft Capital chairman Harrison Croft announces new venture fund focused on underestimated founders. Isabella shows the screen to her mother, both of them reading the headline in disbelief. "Unbelievable," Elena mutters. "After everything he did, he's trying to rebrand himself as a champion of diversity." Isabella sets down her phone, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Actually, this might be the most significant victory of all." "How do you figure that?" Elena asks skeptically. "Because it means the landscape has shifted so dramatically that even Harrison Croft, the embodiment of the old guard, recognizes that the future belongs to inclusion, not exclusion." Isabella takes another bite of cake, savoring both the sweet flavor and the sweeter taste of this unexpected triumph. "He's not leading the change, he's following it. And that's how you know a movement has truly succeeded, when even your opponents begin adopting your language and your values." Elena considers this, then raises her water glass in a toast. "To changing the game so completely that even the Harrison Crofts of the world have no choice but to play by new rules." Isabella clinks her glass against her mother's. "And to the woman who taught me that the most powerful response to being told you don't belong is to create spaces where everyone belongs." 1 year after the private jet incident, Isabella stands on a different stage, this one in the auditorium of her former high school. Before her sight, 300 young women, predominantly girls of color, participants in a new technology education program funded by the Elena Reyes Foundation. Most of you have heard the story, Isabella begins, of how my mother and I were kicked off a private jet and how that led to significant changes in the tech industry. It's become something of a legend, 20 minutes that changed everything. She smiles, looking out at the eager young faces. But the truth is, those 20 minutes weren't the beginning of the story, and they certainly weren't the end. The beginning was decades earlier, when my mother refused to accept limitations placed on her as a Latina woman in healthcare administration, when my father taught me that excellence is the best response to prejudice. When teachers in this very school, some still here today, pushed me to pursue my interest in computer science, despite the statistics showing how few women of color succeeded in that field. Isabella moves across the stage, making eye contact with different students. And the end of the story, it hasn't been written yet, because the real work, the work of creating an industry and a world where talent and character matter more than appearance or background, that work continues. And soon, it will be your work too. She gestures to the side of the stage where Elena stands with several other women leaders from across the tech industry who have joined Isabella's Coalition for Change. The most important lesson from our experience isn't about confrontation or even justice, though both have their place. It's about preparation meeting opportunity. It's about building networks of support that allow you to stand firm when challenges come. And most of all, it's about reimagining what's possible for yourselves, for your communities, and for the world you'll help create through technology. As Isabella concludes her speech, the young women rise in applause, their faces alight with possibility. In the back of the auditorium, unnoticed by most, a reporter captures the moment for tomorrow's headline. 1 year after private jet incident, Isabella Reyes's movement transforms tech industry landscape. But the most significant transformation isn't visible in headlines or metrics. It's in the subtle shift in how people speak about diversity in tech, not as a problem to be solved or a box to be checked, but as an essential element of innovation itself. It's in the growing recognition that excellence takes many forms and speaks with many voices. And it's in the young women sitting in that auditorium no longer questioning whether they belong in technology, but rather what contributions they will make to its future. As Isabella and Elena leave the school together, a light spring rain begins to fall, not unlike the rain that fell on that fateful day at the private airfield. But this time, there's no humiliation, no urgent phone calls, no need for rapid response. Just two women walking together, sheltered by a single umbrella, their steps synchronized after years of moving through the world side by side. Do you ever think about them? Elena asks suddenly. The flight crew from that day? Isabella considers the question. Sometimes. I heard most of them found other jobs eventually. The pilot actually reached out to apologize personally a few months ago. And did you forgive him? Isabella is silent for a moment, raindrops pattering on the umbrella above them. I told him that forgiveness wasn't what mattered. What mattered was whether he'd learned whether he'd teach his children and his colleagues to do better. Elena nods, satisfied with this answer. And Croft, have you forgiven him? At this, Isabella actually laughs. Croft's underestimated Founders Fund has actually become one of the better ones in the industry. Turns out when your reputation and legacy are on the line, you can become quite committed to a cause. They reach their car, and Isabella holds the umbrella as her mother gets in. Before closing the door, Elena looks up at her daughter, her expression serious again. You know, for all the good that's come from this, I still sometimes wish we just made it onto that plane and had our quiet birthday trip to Italy. Isabella smiles, understanding completely. There's always next year, Mom, and this time we'll own the plane. As they drive away from the school, past the neighborhood where Isabella grew up, past the bank where Elena had signed the papers to remortgage her home for her daughter's dream, the rain begins to ease. Sunlight breaks through the clouds, creating that particular golden light that follows storms, illuminating a world that, while not transformed completely, has shifted enough to allow new possibilities to take root and grow. And somewhere in that illuminated world, in boardrooms and classrooms, in startups and established tech giants, people are making different choices, not because of policies or mandates, but because two women refused to leave a jet, quietly refused to accept that some doors remain closed, no matter how successful you become. 20 minutes that led to everyone being fired. 1 year that began to change an industry. And a future still being written, one decision, one stand, one moment of courage at a time. Let us know in the comments below. Would you have fought back or walked away? Your perspective matters in these important conversations.